Hi. Thank you so much for those welcomes, all of you. Wow, thank you guys. This is very cool to be here. I'm Eliza Dushku. I grew up in Watertown. So Waltham, my hometown neighbors, there are a lot of memories for sure. Thanks to my family for being here as well. Thank all of you guys for being here and for everything you've done surrounding DEIS Impact, which is such an important and extraordinary initiative. Brandeis, everybody, Brandeis as a whole, thank you. And very special thanks to Marcy McPhee, my old Sunday school teacher, as my former hot Sunday school teacher. Marcy McPhee, you still got it, Mama. And actually, just last year, Marcy sent me a card, and her return address sticker has Wonder Woman emblazoned on it. And Marcy, you are that. So it made me remember all of our sort of feminist girl power connections from all those years ago. And so thank you for having us. This is also very surreal to be standing up here to talk about my experiences working alongside my beloved mother, Mama Judy, for an NGO that I care so deeply for, THRIVE-Gulu. Recounting my trips thus far to Gulu, Uganda, working with former child soldiers and victims of unspeakable war crimes and atrocities. Thinking back to where all of this lifeblood work and my passion for it began. I'm a kid who grew up down the street and was a bit of a precocious little punk. And I may not come off as the type to be leading a nonprofit, but when I think about my life, I actually think that ending up in Hollywood was more random. It was something of an accident. I tripped and fell at an audition that wasn't even my audition, and pretty suddenly overnight was given an opportunity to become an actress. But my involvement in THRIVE-Gulu, on the other hand, is something that I have thought deeply about. My being a part of this organization, not accidental. When I envision what I want to do with the rest of my life and the kind of legacy that I want to leave, this is something that really, really resonates. It's about people helping people. Sometimes that's something I think that we all have the power to get behind. And being here and being a part of this organization is really a true honor, and I relish the opportunity to share some of my experiences with you and spend some time getting to know many of you and have you share your experiences with me, because you're my kind of peoples. And one person alone, me alone, you alone, is not people. We're not as effective, we're not as wise, we're not as curious or efficient as we are when we work together. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned through this work. So, about 4 years ago, my mother, whom I talk to almost every day, was sharing with me about her most recent course she'd taught at Suffolk University, which focused on the reintegration and rehabilitation of former child soldiers in northern Uganda. My mother's been teaching international comparative politics and women's studies since before I was born. And when we were kids, she would often teach a course and then chaperone a group of her brave students off to the countries that she had just taught about, and then bring along one of my brothers or myself. Russia, Africa, China, Iran, Central America, these trips definitely shaped my life early on. And sort of the running joke in our family is that when other kids and families were going to Cancun or Hawaii for spring break, our mother was bringing us somewhere where there had just been a revolution, there was about to be a revolution, or where she was going to start one. So social justice and equality are the center of our mother's life, and these seeds were planted in me and my brothers. So back to when Mama Judy suggested that I join her on her upcoming trip to Uganda, while admittedly this particular trip felt sort of peculiarly frightening. I had only recently begun to read little bits here and there about these ominous child soldiers. I Googled Gulu, the Ugandan war, Joseph Kony, and as I learned more, my fears only seemed all the more warranted. Kony, an international war criminal, is still out there somewhere, potentially in frightening proximity to northern Uganda. The US State Department website informed me that Gulu was considered a red zone, not safe to travel to or recommended to travel to. Now, my mother is an insanely experienced traveler, and I would not recommend this kind of rogue social justice travel without an experienced leader who has a strong network of resources on the ground. But even so, I was scared. And some of you may know, I was dating my now boyfriend, Rick Fox, who some of you may know. Physically, Rick is a 6'8", dark-skinned, athletic man, and he was scared, crapless. Nevertheless, the feeling of danger and uncertainty propelled us to really want to jump in and go, to descend into Uganda, to sit side by side and hear the stories of these former child soldiers. Child soldiers are children who were abducted, often in the night at 8, 9, 10 years old from school or while they were asleep in their homes. Violent rebels appeared at random and massacred villages, took these little kids, sometimes horrifyingly, forcing them to kill their own family members, parents, or friends if they wanted to live. The rebels took them out into the bush to become trained killers, slaves, sex slaves, and members of the rebel army, the Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRA. Children were beaten, tortured, terrorized, and stripped of their God-given identities. So now the question was, who are these former child soldiers we're going to meet and have Coca-Cola with, and what are we going to say and do in response to what we hear? Rick and I traveled to Kampala, Uganda's capital city, to meet my mother and begin our journey. At this point, my mother had never met this guy, Rick, that I was dating, and she doesn't follow sports, so she had no real preconceived notions about him. My honey showed up, bless his heart, having gone down to the Army-Navy store. He Googled Gulu too, dressed in full SWAT gear. I still don't know how he smuggled the stun gun through customs, but he did. In any case, my mother was surprised, but knew that once he met some people there, his armor would likely come down. The next morning, several young women and a few with their babies in their arms, babies that were raped into them by the rebel captors, and a few young men met us at our hotel in Kampala. An incredible woman named Eliza Dushku had led them down from Gulu because my mother's university had decided at the last minute that it was in fact too dangerous for the students to travel. So traveling 5 hours by minibus, Lena brought these late teens in. You could tell they trusted her, but they seemed shy and nervous around our group, to say the least. I remember sitting across from one of the young men named James. He was 16, handsome, wary, with eyes sort of skittish. One of the most overwhelming feelings of my life came over me as I undoubtedly knew and felt in his presence that this young man had seen and done and lived hell. When he looked at me, I was uneasy, but I couldn't look away. He had something to say, yet he was reticent. I was riveted. You know, some of the women started to share their stories, and Lena held their hands and encouraged them to go on if they became emotional and didn't know how to. My mom, Judy, rocked one of their babies as if it were her own. I watched James and wondered, you know, was he still a kid? After experiencing what no kid possibly could, was he successfully turned into a killer? And if so, could he ever turn back? We took a break to get some air outside when someone kicked us a soccer ball. Suddenly, James lit up. He didn't speak, but his expression sent a clear message. He was wide open and ready to kick. We'd made a connection. Kicking that ball around with James in the courtyard, we witnessed James reawaken. He came to life as a kid, possibly the kid he used to be. I have a teenage nephew, and Rick has a teenage son, and in that moment, we saw in his eyes the same glint that we see in our teenage boys back here in Boston. It was really beautiful. To say that that day triggered something in me, to face something so fearful, and then come to know and stand for these young people who had been beaten down, stripped of fundamental rights, and then some, is my soup to nuts, heart to guts truth. Led by my mother, we had a this is the place moment, and after all of her years working and traveling, we felt an undeniable connection to the people of Gulu, people who we've continued to meet with, whose stories we've listened to and been humbled by, people who we ardently desire to see rehabilitated, reintegrated, and healed. Social justice to me is about solidarity. It takes force and activity. Within Thrive, we organize solidarity trips where a group travels to Gulu with the purpose of building something on the ground with our staff and members as a team. On one of our most recent solidarity trips, we had the chance to build a house for my sister Rose. Rose is a young woman, almost my age, who was abducted by rebels at 9 years old. She spent 10 years in the bush as one of Joseph Kony's right-hand men's wives, becoming pregnant 3 times as a child herself against her will. One afternoon, Rose described to me the day she saw her narrow window to escape from her captors. With her 5-year-old daughter, Vicky, running barefoot alongside her, holding her hand, her 1-year-old on her back, while 6 months pregnant, she ran from the south of neighboring Sudan back to her former home in Gulu. I have chills remembering her sharing this with me as we hammered mud bricks together in the sun on her new land that we had spent the week constructing her new home on. Rose, having lost her own mother, calls my mama Judy mother, so we say that we're sisters. On the final day of our solidarity trip, dancing in her new completed living room, I promised I'd bring back a radio and that we'd have a sleepover the next time I'm in town, and we will. I can't describe the feeling being a part of Rose's life today. Hearing her triumphs of learning how to farm on her land, raise money selling peanut butter from her peanut trees, which we have a jar of here for a lucky one of you, all the way from Gulu. This is Rose's peanut butter from her trees. I will make your first fluffernutter sandwich with it. Today, Rose earns her own money to send her daughters to school. She is feisty and fun-loving, and she's really warm. Rose was broken, to say the least, when we met her, and today she has struggles, no question, but she emanates hope and life. At Thrive, people say from victim to survivor to thriver. Who can't get behind that, right? At Thrive, we strive not simply to offer food or shelter, which are no doubt important, but rather fill a different need, the need to have an identity and be recognized and be heard. We take our agenda from the people we are trying to help. We are asking them, what do you want to say? How do you want to be heard? How do you want to be helped? The Thrive Center we're building and operating is a place for those seeking healing, connection, and self-expression, a place where people can go to develop a sense of dignity and share their humanity. Times in my day when I could probably find 50 other different things to do are now easily, overwhelmingly directed towards answering one question. How can we further fulfill our commitment to our friends in Gulu and expand the work, programs, and solidarity being created at Thrive? Working for social justice has been, for me, a transformative experience. It's brought me more happiness and purpose than anything I've ever done in my entire life, and I really mean that. I applaud all of you, and it is such a privilege to be in your company. Working together, we must continue to take the reins. We must continue to commit ourselves to service. There's no us and them. We are all in this together. And now for the true star of the show and of my life, my mother, Mama Judy. Thank you.